Welcome everyone to our career preparedness webinar today with Sarah Jolly, Career Services Coordinator at Lanier Tech. I mentioned to the group that Sarah has already graciously done a webinar for us. We've got others on the books with her, and she's been a great resource to our audiences, and I think she will be for all of you today. Sarah is local to our community here. She's a UNG graduate. And worked at UNG as an advisor and in supplemental instruction for quite some time. During that time, she saw the disconnect between college graduates and the job market and chose to utilize her talents at Lanier Technical College, where she could work with students who have careers already in mind. So she is a great resource for guiding students, and I think for anyone in today's climate who is looking to make a career pivot or maybe looking to add a new skill set with the current state of affairs in the world, she is a great resource to help guide you through that. So with that, Sarah, I am going to turn things over to you. Again, as a reminder to everyone, please feel free to engage with Sarah. You can unmute your mics and let her know if you have questions or comments. You can also throw those into the chat feature. So Sarah, we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us today.
Thanks, Laura. So like Laura said, I'm the Career Services Coordinator here at Lanier Technical College. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about getting ready for the job market. So we're going to briefly cover resumes since our last webinar covered resumes quite in depth. I'm going to kind of go quickly over that information, cover letters, interviews, and dressing for success. As Laura said, please feel free to chime in. I like to ask you guys questions and get you involved throughout the presentation. So I would definitely love to hear your voices and interact a little bit instead of just talking to my screen. So please don't be shy. So we'll get started with resumes. I always like to start out with some shocking statistics because I think it points out the importance of a resume and why I kind of harp on being consistent and making sure you proofread it. So the average time a recruiter is going to spend looking at a resume is about 6 seconds. Which my watch doesn't have a second hand, so I can't time it, but it's probably about the same length of time it took me to get all of that out of my mouth. So when you're looking at a resume in 6 seconds, what things are you going to notice if you're
Sarah, you can keep going. We'll check the mics.
So in about 6 seconds, they're going to be looking for keywords, of course. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to the job description when you're writing your resume and pick up on any of those keywords. And if you can include them in your resume, do. The other thing they're going to pick up on is if you've proofread a lot of documents, you notice errors very quickly. And so that's why it's very important that we're monitoring for errors before submitting resumes. 76% of resumes are discarded due to use of an unprofessional email address. So, even if it's mom to cuties or, it doesn't have to be something inappropriate. It can just still be unprofessional though. So if you don't have a professional email address, there's lots of free providers out there, Gmail, Hotmail, Ymail, where you can open another email address specifically for your job searching and use, first initial last name or first name, last name, or some combination of just your legal name that would be recognizable to your resume. 68% of employers are going to search applicants on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on social media of any sort. I am not telling you to delete your social media profiles, but I am telling you to be aware of what's public on your social media before you start applying for jobs, because I would hate to see anybody get cut out of being a potential candidate simply because what's your private information is able to be seen publicly and somebody went and searched it. The average number of people who apply for any given job is 118. Now, that number came prior to the pandemic, so I would venture to say it's probably twice that now, meaning that competition is stiff, so you want to make sure that your resume is top-notch before you submit it. to make sure that you stay in that running. And then 58% of hiring managers say they've caught a lie on a resume. So don't lie. The goal is, of course, to make yourself, look as good as possible, but we can do that without lying about anything. Plus, if you get the job and you lied on your resume, how are you going to do the job? So a resume should always start with your header, name, present address, your email address. Again, make it professional, your phone number. If you have a LinkedIn profile, you can absolutely include that URL on your resume. If you're working from a template and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, make sure you get rid of the little placeholder that says LinkedIn profile. So you can see an example at the top there of a header. Your name should be big and bold. The biggest thing we see on your resume should be your name. Underneath of that, if you are moving into a new field and you don't have experience in that field, or you're a recent graduate, it may be appropriate to use an objective statement. Now, if you're staying in the same field and you have lots of experience, you don't need one. It's just a good place to kind of highlight what you are bringing to the table to the employer. And that's the biggest thing about an objective statement. If you're going to use one, make sure that it focuses on what you are bringing to the employer as opposed to what you want to get from the employer. So a lot of times I see these written as, looking for a great job with a great company, making great money and getting great benefits and, the opportunity to move up and learn. Well, those are all things that you want. So we want to focus on what you're going to bring to the employer that they want. So it's a quick advertisement blip for yourself. And if you keep that focus in there, it'll be a good objective statement. So again, if you're moving into a new field and you've gotten any kind of education or certification rather than a lot of experience in that field, I would recommend putting your education at the top of your resume as opposed to at the very bottom. If you have lots of experience and you have education, it's better to highlight the experience first. But again, if you don't have the experience, highlight the education by moving it to the top. Make sure that you're including the name of your program, the name of the institution that you received your degree, diploma, certificate from, your date or expected date of graduation. Now, don't include the start date and the end date. It does not matter if it took you 10 years to get a degree. They only want to know when you graduated. So you can say expected graduation date or just graduation date. If your GPA was above a 3.0, go ahead and include that. That shows you were an AB student and did really well in your studies. And if you got any significant achievements, if you graduated with honors, things of that nature, you can include those there. Now, again, if you have a lot of experience in the field you're in, you're going to want to highlight that first and go ahead and bump the education down to the bottom. Experience, you want it to be formatted very similarly in terms of the name of your position, the name of the company, and then different here, you are going to include the start month and year and then the end month and year. You want to put your experience in reverse chronological order, meaning the most recent job at the top and work your way back. So if you're currently employed, that should be the first job we see on your resume. Use bullet points to break down your job description, what your duties were, and start each bullet point with an action verb. So, create, organize, whatever your job duties were. And again, this is where I recommend, taking a good look at the job description for the job you're applying to and seeing what action verbs did they use. That they'll say job duties include communicating with customers. Well, if you communicate with people, make sure that word's on your resume. So you can get a good idea of how to tweak your resume based on a job description. And you should be tweaking your resume for every job that you're applying to. I'm not saying to rewrite it, but tweak it. See what their wording is, see what they're looking for you to accomplish, and see how you can incorporate those things in your resume. So here's just an example. You can see every bullet point there starts with an action verb. If you have any kinds of statistics, numbers are a great way to draw attention on a document full of words. And they also show outcome. So if you can include anything like that, it's great too. The other thing to note there is you can see my date is formatted as an abbreviated month, Feb, instead of February. If you do that, make sure you do that throughout your resume. So that's another big piece to keep in mind is be consistent whatever you're doing. How you format your dates should look the same throughout the resume. If you put periods at the end of your bullet points, just make sure everything has a period at the end of it. If you don't, make sure none of them have bullet points. Just make sure you're being consistent throughout your resume. And then another section that you can include if, depending on the amount of experience you have and the amount of space you have on your resume with formatting, if you had any special awards, any special honors, or, volunteer activities. So when we say activities, we don't really mean, that you enjoy kayaking and hiking. All those things are awesome. We're looking for professional activities. And volunteering is a great one. It shows initiative and willingness to go above and beyond. So, and you can format, depending on what they are. If it's volunteering and you did it for a long time with a certain organization, you can format that just like a job and list your duties. So that's a great way to get involved, especially if you are moving into a new field, to get some experience, is to volunteer for an organization, because you will get experience. Another thing to note is whatever you're listing, make sure you spell out the organization. A lot of different programs have, certain organizations you can belong to, like the American Medical Association, or, we see ADA on the back of our toothpaste, and we all know what that means now. But if you weren't a dentist and you didn't see those commercials, you wouldn't know what the ADA stood for. So make sure you spell those things out on your resume so we all know what you're referencing. When you're formatting your resume, aside from your headers, which should be big and bold so we know what section we're looking at, make sure you keep your body font between 10 and 12 points. So sometimes I'll see people squeeze it down to like 8-point font to make things fit. And then I have to break out the magnifying glass. But if it's over 12 points, it starts to look a little elementary, just too big. So 10 and 12-point font, and you'd be surprised what a difference that makes. If you're at 12-point font and you need a little extra room, bump it all down to 10, take a point out from there. And the same thing with spacing. If you need to use a little more spacing, make it 1.15 spacing between your sentence breaks. Again, section headers should be bold, underlined, stand out. Keep everything aligned to the left. Since we read from left to right, it makes it very easy, especially with those bullet points, for us to pick out those action words. Those are going to be the key words that they're looking for when they're, looking over your resume. Again, use bullet points when you put it in sentence format. You put your job description in sentence format. It makes it much more difficult to pick out those keywords and read what we want to read, and tired eyes, and it's little things like that that you'd be surprised that recruiters are like, I'm not wasting my time with this. They want it easy. They want it easy to digest. So make it easy for them. Avoid designer resumes. Keep it simple. So, no fancy borders. Don't put your picture on your resume. That just opens you up to unnecessary bias before you even have a chance to meet people. But also avoid those resumes that have the fancy little boxes where your skills go here and your job description goes here, and this little box has, your contact info. When you add those text boxes into a resume, if a company is using an applicant tracking system, that system can't read the different text boxes. And so it will read one box, and if that doesn't meet whatever parameters they've set up in the ATS system, it'll get kicked out. So, keep it a simple document without text boxes and separate boxes. I would avoid borders. You can use colors, and I'll talk more about colors. Keep in mind, colors in an interview apply the same way to colors on your resume, colors in your professional documents. Keep your resume to one page unless you have a full 2 pages. So if you have a page and a half, that might be where you start adding space between your sentences or bumping up your font size to make sure that it takes up the full 2 pages. If you have a page in one sentence, then maybe you need to make something a little smaller or move something just a little bit to make sure that it all fits on one page. So again, you can play with all of those things, but the biggest rule is be consistent. Again, with the applicant tracking systems, they're looking for keywords and that they can read so they're not in separate text boxes. So make sure you're paying attention to the keywords in the job description and what those action verbs are. Again, use numbers, use outcomes if you have them. It kind of does a little more for you in terms of you can prove what you've done. Save and send your resume as a PDF. So, you know, if you're emailing it to somebody or if you're submitting it online, most often they have a place for you to submit more than one document. So you can send it as a Word document, but I would also send it as a PDF. If you're emailing it to somebody, I would simply submit it as a PDF, because if they're using a different version of Word than you, the PDF will basically take a picture of your document. Whereas if you send it as a Word document, your formatting can get mixed up between, you know, once it shifts over to their computer, it may not hold the formatting. And some don'ts, we don't need pronouns on the resume. Resume writing is kind of dry. So we're taking out any unnecessary words that we can. And I, me, my, those are all words that we don't need to include in the resume, not even in the objective statement. You almost be writing it as if you're writing about somebody else doing it. Don't include non-essential information. So like I said, activities like I like hiking isn't professional in nature, so you don't need to include that. You also no longer need to include references upon request. That's an outdated practice at this point. Everybody in HR knows that you're going to provide references if we ask for them. Again, don't utilize the designer resume templates. Keep it simple. And don't ever send your resume without proofreading it. Not only yourself, but have somebody else proofread it. Because when we write, we know what we're trying to say, and it's very easy to miss our own mistakes. So always have somebody else look your resume over before you submit it. And again, don't ever lie on your resume. It's just worth it. So another document that we see a lot of times when we're trying to apply to jobs is some places will request cover letters. Now, in general, if they want a cover letter, they're going to ask you for a cover letter. If they don't ask for one, you don't have to include it. The exception to that rule being is if somebody you know connected you or you networked, or maybe you met this person at an event, so you're applying directly to the person that you were somehow connected to. In that case, it's probably appropriate to include a cover letter or an email that would serve as a cover letter when you contact this person. So your cover letter, again, should be written specifically for the position you're applying to. So I'm not saying you have to rewrite absolutely everything, but make sure it's tailored for that job and that company. So with a cover letter, you're writing more to the company than just for the job. Your header and fonts, they should match your resume, and it should be formatted like a business letter. So you can see it on the example on your screen. There's a header there with the person's information, and then the business letter formatting. I always need to be reminded of what that looks like, so a quick Google search will show you that. And the good part about business letter formatting is it takes up a lot of space on your page, and you want your cover letter to be short. So one page, so that's less you have to actually write in your cover letter. It should only be 3 paragraphs, and I say 3 paragraphs, not the traditional 3 sentences, 3 paragraphs, like, you know, maybe a sentence or 2. Again, it should be very short, but the formula for it is grab their attention. So, you know, writing and saying, well, I'll go into that in a second. The second one is show what you've got to offer them. So again, focus on what you're bringing to the company. And the last paragraph, you know, say something about that company that you know something about them, like you're genuinely interested in that company. So this is an example of that opening paragraph. The First one is in response to your posting for, I would like to express my interest in the recruitment process. Well, and that's most of the time what I see generally. Avoid that. It kind of restates the obvious. We know you're interested because you're writing a cover letter. So say something that sounds, you're excited to be applying and you actually know what you're applying for. So I would say do some research about the company, find their mission statement. If you know nothing else about them, know what their mission is. Not verbatim, but the general idea of what they do. So you can see in the second example here, as a lifelong enthusiast, of your initiatives, I was thrilled to see the posting. So you're still listing the posting that you're interested in, but you sound excited now. It sounds like your dream job. And even if it's not, being passionate about something can be the difference between candidate A, who has all of the qualifications, but is a real bummer to work with, and candidate B, who maybe needs to learn a thing or two, but everybody loves them. They want to be there every day. They're excited to be there. They're willing to learn. Sometimes that's the difference. So always, fake it till you make it, if nothing else, that this is the job that you want and you like this company and you're excited. So the second paragraph, you want to relate your previous experience to the role that you're applying for. So you don't need to restate your resume, but maybe you can expand on something. Like if you did include some statistics, maybe you want to expand on what that project looked like, or maybe your previous experience isn't exactly related to what you're applying for. So maybe use that paragraph to relate the experience to what you're applying for. Provide specific examples of how your skills are going to meet the needs of the company. So again, this is really, how are you going to be the best fit for that role? And then the last one, this is where you got to bring that passion. Why do you want this job, not just any job? Know something about the company, know something about their mission, so you can say, like here at Linear Tech, I know that you guys are all about workforce development, and I care about that. I want to see people get jobs and have good lives, and not just investing in school for the sake of investing. I know that they need an outcome, and this is outcome based. So focus on something like that with the company. Maybe you're in healthcare and the hospital really cares about moms and babies, and you just love moms and babies. That's your passion, so find something about that company that really clicks with you, and focus on that and get excited about it, and let that show in your cover letter. So again, you may not have to rewrite the whole thing depending on what the job is, but you do need to tweak it for every job that you're applying to, because there's no way you can be addressing one company and send the same letter to another company and still be addressing that company. So make sure you're tailoring that for the specific job and the specific company. And again, just like with your resume, make sure somebody else proofreads your work so that they can catch those little minor mistakes. And it can be, you would be surprised, but it can be as simple as an extra space between words. Like having read a lot of resumes over the past few years, have gotten really good at picking out, if it's just a difference in font size or an extra space. It can be the littlest thing. So make sure somebody's looking it over. So you've done all that preliminary work. You've gotten your resume perfect, your cover letter. You put in all that work up front. So maybe you're not applying to as many jobs, but I promise if you do that work up front, you're going to get more response for the amount of work you did. So you do all that and you finally get the interview. So you're going into the interview, you've got to make sure that you research the company, that you find the right attire, that you're prepared. And by prepared, I mean practice beforehand. So if you did the right work for your cover letter and your resume, you already researched the company. So before your interview, make sure you're digging back into, if you printed it out or you saved it in a file on your computer, which I would recommend doing when you're job searching, save that information and save that job description, because a lot of times they'll take those down once they start contacting people people to interview. So, you know, screenshot it or copy paste it, whatever you have to do to make sure you have all of those documents. And keep them saved away until you get a yay or a nay from a company so that when they do call you, you're prepared to go in there. But again, make sure you know their mission statement. If you don't know anything else about the company, know their mission, know what they're really about. At the heart of it all, what are they trying to accomplish? If they've been in the news or they have any newsworthy projects that are going on, it's good to know about that. It shows that you're interested and you're keeping up with what's going on with the company. Most companies now have websites or at least a Facebook website, depending on the size of the company, where you can kind of research some of this stuff and figure out what's going on with them that's current. And then depending again on the size of the company, so say if it's in healthcare, a hospital's huge, there's lots of different departments, try and find some information specifically about the department that you want to work in. So yeah, and again, you should know a lot of that from preparing the cover letter. So now you've got all that stuff ready to go, all your background information, the day of, and you haven't picked what you're going to wear yet. Don't be that person. Go ahead and pick what you're going to wear ahead of time. So when I was doing the job search thing, I had literally one outfit that I kept in my closet that I would get dry cleaned when I had to wear it, just for interviews, so that I never had to question what I was wearing for an interview. So if you need an interview outfit, just go ahead and get it, save it, wear it to every interview. You can do that. But make sure that whatever it is, it's pressed professional wear. So ladies, we get a lot more options, which is both a blessing and a curse. But, you know, you can wear pants, but make sure that they're, you know, structured material. So by that, I mean not, you know, wispy, flowy pants, but, you know, a business pant, gentlemen, of course, pants, no shorts. And for skirts, ladies, if we're going to do a skirt, again, make sure it's a structured skirt. It shouldn't be a flowy skirt. We want to make sure we have appropriate length and cuts for our clothing. So, you know, ladies, we need to be aware of, especially with, you know, button or the cut of the collar, that we're not exposing ourselves. I would always say if it's a sleeveless top, make sure you're wearing a cardigan or a blazer or something over it, just because it looks more professional to not be sleeveless. And then with patterns and colors of clothing, so patterns, we don't want anything to be too terribly busy. The goal with our interview outfit is to not draw attention away from our personality. If you leave an interview and they're talking about what you wore to the interview, maybe you didn't do it right. We kind of want that to be a side note that, you know, oh, and they were dressed nice. Like that should be about all that comes out of the interview outfit. So if we go in there with crazy patterns and bright colors, they might be a little like, whoa. And, you know, a word about colors there are psychology to colors. Anybody in marketing in advertising can tell you, you know, that color comes with connotation, right? So when you see, well, let me ask you guys this, and please unmute your mics and shout some answers out here. What do you guys think the worst color for an interview is?
Red. Red.
All right, we got two reds. So you're close. Red can be an intimidating color, right? Because it's intense, it's love, and it's hate. But actually the most, like the poorly voted color for interviews is orange. And maybe you guys didn't think of that because I think most of us wouldn't wear orange to an interview anyway. I mean, but because orange, you know, when you see orange, where do you see it? You see it when you're driving down the road and there's construction work, caution signs, right? Things that you're trying to avoid. So if you show up to an interview wearing orange, they may subconsciously think like caution, danger, avoid this. Yellow, similarly, yellow, we see it on those cautionary signs on the roadway as well. Again, red can be perceived as really intense and a power move as well. Often we see the president wearing a red tie. So, use it sparingly. And it also depends on the tone of the color as well. Is it a really bright, intense red, or is it something subdued and burgundy? Maybe you can get away with that. The best rated color for an interview is blue. So blue is a relaxing, calm color. Again, it depends on the tone. So thinking not, bright turquoise, beachy blue, but more, navy blue, subdued blue, something in that zone of blue would be good. So just things to keep in mind. Again, you can Google search this stuff. You can look up color psychology, and Google will give you a bunch of little, layouts of colors and tell you what they mean if you want to get really into it. But, the biggest thing is, make sure your clothes are taken care of. Like you don't have dog hair, rips and tears. And I'm not hating on dog hair. I have 3 and I carry a lint roller with me everywhere. But there's not stains. And regardless of the job environment, you always want to make sure you're dressed a little nicer than they are on a daily basis. So if the general office attire is, khaki slacks and polos, you're still going to want to show up in a button-up shirt and a tie. So always dress a step up from where they are. And make sure that you're properly groomed from head to toe. So it doesn't really matter if your hair is up or down, as long as it looks like you brushed it that day. For ladies, keep minimal jewelry and makeup. Again, the goal is to not distract from who we are and the conversation that we're trying to have. So, I don't want to go in with bright red lipstick and make them think I have a date when I leave there in 30 minutes. So, keep it calm, daytime makeup, jewelry minimal. Guys, if you have facial hair, I'm not saying you have to shave it off. I don't know what their work policies are, but make sure it's trimmed and, well taken care of. And the same thing for, even your nails on your hands. If you get your nails done, that's great. If you don't, just make sure your nails are clean and, that they're taken care of. Basically, what you're trying to do is show that you take pride in yourself and that you're going to take pride in your work. And again, not distract from anything other than the conversation you're trying to have with an interviewer. So, like I said, avoid bright, flashy colors, avoid the flashy jewelry or heavy makeup, avoid your clothing being wrinkled or tattered. Make sure that it looks like it's been taken care of, and avoid heavy scents. So, I don't even wear perfume to an interview. So just because you don't know who's interviewing you and you don't know if they have allergies, you don't know if they're very sensitive to those things. So, and again, you don't want to distract. If you come in the room smelling like cotton candy, everybody's going to be like, oh, cotton candy, and maybe not thinking fully about what you're saying. So just avoid heavy scents. If you smoke, make sure you don't smoke in your interview outfit or on the way to the interview, because most places now have a 0 tolerance policy for tobacco anyway. So you definitely don't want to smell like smoke when you get there. And again, Google is a wonderful tool. I love it. But if you are looking for ideas on what you could wear or advice, you can always consult the internet. And personally, 2 of my favorite shows are on this image here. So, but they're great examples of what a typical office environment looks like in terms of clothing. So, is there any questions about dressing?
Sarah, I don't think that we have gotten any questions through the chat yet, But just at this point, I will remind everyone that you can certainly unmute your mics to ask questions of Sarah or throw those into the chat. For those that joined us a bit late, that chat feature is in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and I'll be watching those and relaying them to Sarah.
Thanks, Laura. All right, so now to the interview. You're all dressed, you're ready, you look great. So you need to prepare and know where you're going. So map it or Waze it or whatever you use. But I would say if you're not familiar with that area, you've never been there before, it would not be harmful for you to drive out ahead of time and make sure you know where you're going so that the day of, you're not lost and, you know, calling them and saying, I'm going to be late. You never want to be late for your interview. So I have driven out to somewhere prior to an interview just to make sure I knew where I was going on the day of the interview. Make sure you're bringing copies of your resume printed on resume paper if you can get it. Resume paper is similar to cardstock. It's just a little bit thicker than traditional printer paper. And if you have a 2-page resume, make sure that it's only printed on the front side. So you don't want front and back. You want it to be 2 separate sheets of paper, only printed on the front side and not stapled together. Make sure you bring a notepad and a pen along with you to the interview. I have seen people in an interview ask to take out their cell phone and take notes on their cell phone. I personally found that to be a little off-putting because I could be holding my cell phone, but you don't know if I'm taking notes or if I'm texting someone else. So I would recommend for sure to bring pen and paper because an interview tends to bring out a lot of anxiety in most of us. Maybe you're one of the lucky few it doesn't. But for the rest of us, we get all this anxiety, nervous energy, and we start to forget things. We forget what the interviewer said. We forget what questions we were going to ask them. So having a pen and paper there can help you, work through that. And also for me personally, it might give you a little opportunity to take a break to say, oh, can I write that down for a second? And you can almost kind of collect your thoughts a little bit as you're writing. Make sure you prepare questions you want to ask as well and write those down, bring them with you so that, again, when you get to the end of that interview and they say, do you have questions for us? You don't say, no, because not having questions at the end, makes you seem like you're uninterested. You want to seem interested. Again, you want it to seem like this is your dream job. So practice before you go into the interview, and I'm going to give you guys a couple of questions that they might ask you, but find interview questions. Again, Google, go online, find interview questions, and really consider how you would respond to those. Find somebody to practice with, and whether it's a friend or it's your mirror, or honestly, my favorite to use personally is to use my cell phone when I'm at home alone, not in an interview, but preparing for an interview, actually set up your cell phone or a camera or your computer, whatever you might use, and record yourself answering questions. You're your own worst critic. So it gives you an opportunity to see, do I have any little tics? Like, am I twirling my hair while I'm talking because I'm nervous? And how can I quell that in an interview? If you're rambling on and on to answer a question, how can I get this shorter and more succinct? So it gives you that opportunity to see how you're actually reacting in that situation. It's also personally very uncomfortable. Like, I don't like being on camera, so this webinar for me is even nerve-wracking. But to set my camera up in front of me and talk to myself in an empty room brings out the similar anxiety of being in an interview, so I get to practice with that feeling. So they're going to ask you questions, of course, and things that you want to prepare for. Tell me about yourself. Like, every interview I've ever been to is tell me about yourself. And people really struggle with this if they haven't prepared. So again, grab your cell phone or your laptop or whatever you're using and make up your 30-second elevator pitch about who you are professionally. So not who you are on the weekends, not who you are when you go on your beach trip with your family, Who are you professionally? How did you get to where you are? And what are you trying to do in this interview? Keep it short, again, 30 seconds. A word of caution, I have children, so again, I'm not judging, but I never ever tell an interviewer that I have children until they're giving me a job offer and I'm needing to negotiate for, certain time limitations or something like that. Simply because an interviewer is going to say, oh, she has kids, that's extra sick leave, that's extra, time off, that's calls from the school that somebody's sick. So I just don't want to give them that opportunity to make that judgment until there's an offer on the table, until they've decided they like me enough that maybe they're going to make some concessions for me. So I always keep that part out of my tell me about yourself speech. Really, you professionally can include your education, can include previous job experience, can include volunteer roles. But again, short, quick, but practice it so you're just ready and it rolls off your tongue and there's no, well, I went to school and then I got a job. We don't want to do that. Should be well rested. Know the job duties. Again, like I said, if you saved them, you've got them, you can address them. Practice relating your previous experience to the job that you're interviewing for. Practice that. Really that's the biggest thing, is your experience does not have to be exactly what you're applying for, as long as you can relate your experience and let the interviews know how your previous experience relates to the job you're trying to get. Be prepared for those behavioral questions. That's a really big thing in the interview world right now, is tell me about a time when you got into a disagreement with a coworker and how did you handle it? I mean, who among us wants to admit we've ever, most of us, I think, try to not get into disagreements with our coworkers. And then if you do, it's not really something you want to talk about. So, but you have to prepare yourself for those things. So try thinking of some situations where maybe you did get into a disagreement with somebody. It didn't have to be a screaming, yelling. We just did not agree on the way a certain thing should be handled. We had a conversation about it. We basically agreed to disagree, but since I was the one responsible for the project, I got my way. I wouldn't say it like that, but basically we're going through, situation, resolution. What was the situation and how did you resolve it? And focus on that positive resolution at the end. And the same is going to be true when they get to questions about strengths and weaknesses. We love to, talk about our strengths, right? Because we're trying to sell ourselves. We want to talk about our strengths. So that's easy to be like, well, I'm a real go-getter and a quick learner and, I'm really great at all this stuff. Well, what are your weaknesses? Don't be the person that says you don't have any weaknesses, because we know everybody has weaknesses. Be the person that's really thought out, these are my weaknesses. For me personally, time management. I am the world's worst procrastinator, and a calendar for me, for some reason, just does not click in my brain. So I'm also going to tell them how I manage that and make sure that I'm still meeting my duties. I have stock in Post-it note because they are everywhere. I make sure that there are alarms set up on my calendar that let me know something's coming, so that I can make sure that I'm doing that, scheduling out time for me to do certain tasks for a due date that's upcoming. So, address your weakness within reason. Within reason being, make sure your weakness isn't something too awful, right? But, pick a weakness and then pick all the ways that you work around that weakness. But admitting that you have a weakness also says to them that you're willing to hear feedback and to make adjustments and, to be open to, working around other people and their weaknesses and your own. So it's okay to have weaknesses, but we still want to focus on the positive of how we're dealing with it. So at the end, like I said, don't be that person that doesn't have questions. You want to have questions for them. Even if you really don't have questions for them, just ask them questions, because it comes across as being very uninterested in the position, or even the interviewers, when at the end you're like, no, I don't have any questions, like you're just ready to leave. So have questions ready for them. Don't ask them personal questions. So again, just like your elevator pitch, we don't want to talk about our personal selves. We're talking professionally. We don't want to ask them personal questions either. Don't ask them things they've already addressed in the interview, because you were paying attention. So we don't need to re-ask. Again, that notepad comes in handy, so you can write down some of those things that you think you might forget, or that you already had your question written down and they answered it during the interview. Write it down during the interview. Don't ask them about things you can find for yourself. So again, if you did your preliminary work with the cover letter, with the resume, and with preparing for the interview, you've already done a lot of research about the company, so you shouldn't make that faux pas. Questions for them though, ask them questions about the position, like specifically about the position. What does a day look like in this role? Or what does a typical week look like in this role? Is there travel in this role? Ask them about company culture. What's the office environment like? Is everybody really team players, or do people mostly keep to themselves? And consider which do you prefer, because it's important to remember the interview is not just for you or for them to interview you. This is also your opportunity to interview them. Is this really someplace that you want to work? If you've ever had a horrible boss, it's not a good place to be. It will stress you out 24/7, not just 40 hours a week. So, take this opportunity to interview the interviewers, and ask them, things that are important to you. Do you like that everybody in the office gets together for a birthday party every month? Or is that not your style? Ask them about advancement opportunities. Is there room for you to grow? And even if there's not, at least you know. Ask them about training. Do they expect you to come in the door doing things your own way and knowing how to do them, or are they going to train you to do it their way? How are they going to evaluate you? Is it, monthly, every 6 months, every year? How are you going to receive feedback? And ask them about work hours and travel, because those things are important for us too, right? We want to know when we're going to be home at night and if we have time for dinner. So salary negotiations, a lot of companies now they're not posting what the job listing is going to pay, which I disagree with. And a lot of people on LinkedIn, we're all having these conversations, but their goal is to get you to do the most amount of work for the least amount of money, right? And your goal is to get the most amount of money to do the work. I won't say the least amount of work, because we're all great workers, but something you could do is you maybe have a friend call HR and ask them what the pay range is for that position. And that way you haven't given away any of your info. They have no idea it's you, but now you have that information in your pocket. Don't discuss your current or previous salaries. So if they ask, what did you make, or what are you currently making? Well, maybe you currently make $13 an hour, but you really want to make 15. So you could just say to them, well, I'm looking to make $15 an hour in this role. And they can say yes or no, but you've put it out there, what you want to make as opposed to what you are making. And remember, it's a negotiation. So the biggest thing is know your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, meaning what's the least amount of money you're willing to do the job for. So you're making 13, you want to make 15, but you're not going to leave your current job for anything below 14, because you're wanting to move up. So if you know that, and they offer you 14, you can always come back, well, I'd really like to see 15 for this position. And they say yes or no, but you know that you will do it for 14 if they won't go any higher. But if they come back and say, well, 1350, you can be like, well, thanks so much for your time, because you know you're not willing to do it for less than 14. So when you get to the interview, make sure you arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. If you're any earlier than that, stay in your car. Make sure that you are the only person going in for the interview. So if somebody drove you, they need to stay in the car, not even walk into the building with you. Again, I mostly talk to students, so this may or may not be relevant to this audience, but a lot of younger people I'm seeing using the AirPods and smartwatches. I would say do not bring any of that to your interview. I would even go so far as to say leave your cell phone in the car so that you don't have anything distracting you during that interview. You don't want to see notifications going off and you're looking down at your watch every 5 seconds because people are texting you, or that you're listening to music while people are trying to talk to you. So just some things to keep in mind. I like to do the last mirror check, whether I ask to use a restroom or checking it out in my car, making sure I don't have lipstick on my teeth or something, and the Superman pose, because body language matters. And they found in a study that if you basically fake confident body language, you will feel more confident. So maybe some of you are familiar with the Superman pose, arms on your hips, shoulders back, chest out, take a deep breath. And if you hold that for 60 seconds, they found you will actually feel more confident. So you can, go use the restroom and do that for a minute. Hope nobody walks in and sees you doing it because it feels awkward. But it will help you feel more confident. And then when you're in the interview, even if you feel scared or nervous, I want you to fake the body language because it's going to help. If I sit here like this and I'm talking to you guys today and I'm doing this number, you're going to already know that I don't feel confident. But if I sit up straight and I look you in the eye and I smile, even though I'm nervous, it's okay. And I'm going to feel better doing it. So make sure you're keeping those things in mind. And if you have a face like mine, I tend to look angry a lot. So I always have to remind myself to smile when I'm talking to people. If there's more than one interviewer, scan the room, make sure you address everybody. Be aware of any fidgeting that you might have. If you're a knee shaker under the table, be aware of that kind of stuff, and stay calm. Remember your selling points, right? You practice all of this, you're ready, you're prepared. You have your handy dandy notebook with your notes. So, you're going to be fine. After the interview, thank your interviewers. If you can remember their names, that's fantastic and helpful because, thank you so much, Laura, for having me today. It just makes it feel more personal. Get their business cards, ask them. There's more than one, ask all of them and get their business cards, because then you have their contact information and you can send a thank you email. It used to be a thank you note, but the world moves so quickly, a note's not going to get there by the time they're doing the hiring thing. So, go ahead and send a thank you email that evening, thanking them for their time, and then take a deep breath and relax, because now it's out of your hands and you just got to wait for the call. And again, remember, it's a two-way transaction. It is not just them interviewing you. It is for you to interview them. It's not that all of the power is out of your hands because you're the one looking for a job. So don't get stuck somewhere horrible. Make sure you're asking their questions, questions of the interviewers. First impressions do matter. So again, make sure you're paying attention to dress and all of those things. And practice makes perfect. So don't be bashful. Get out your cameras. Videotape yourselves, practice those interview questions, practice your speech, because that's going to make you all the more better and confident in an interview. So that's all I got for you guys. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
All right.
I was wondering, how far, like, if you worked for a company for, say, like 17 years, and then you are doing an up-to-date like resume, would you put any other previous jobs on there or just leave it at that one job?
So you don't have to. Technically, a resume, they generally recommend about 10 years. But depending on how long your job description is, or if you want to include those other positions, you can, but you certainly don't have to. 17 years is a very long time to commit to one company. And you're not obligated to go back any further than that. I would just be very thorough about what you did in those 17 years, if it will be the only job experience listed on your resume.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you had already done a web session like this, but it was more focused on resume. Did you
Yes.
also record that? And is there any way that we could get the recording of that?
Yeah,
Laura?
definitely. I can just include that recording along with this one when we email it out to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
Well, if
Okay,
that's
so I have
it
another
for,
more question.
oh, go ahead.
Is that okay? I'm sorry. I just have two more questions. Well, one question is, you did say at the beginning that there are like keywords that pull the employer in, to actually want to reach your interview, your resume. What
Mhm.
what are some terms or, that they are looking for?
So with keywords, it's generally going to be in the job descriptions, those action verbs that are telling you what you're going to be doing, like lift, pull, send, like I mentioned, communicate, create, things like that. Those keywords are generally going to be those action verbs. And then if there's like a software that they use specifically, or something of that nature, those would most likely be keywords as well.
Okay. And my last one is, what is an appropriate way, or would you even ask the question of when after you're being interviewed, would you ask them like, what was it that caught your attention, or how would you word that, or would you even ask that question? Like, why did they choose you for the interview, give you the opportunity?
Um, I don't know that I would ask it in that way to say, like, why are you interested in me?
Right.
As much as I might ask is there anything about my resume that concerns you that I might address while we're still here? Or, I would say, because you're really going to put them on the spot with what interested you in me?
Right.
Because they'll be like, well, you have the experience we were looking for, and the software. But if you say, is there anything that concerns you? It gives you an opportunity to address any concerns that they might have before you leave the room about your capability to do the job.
Okay, that sounds better. I was trying to figure out what would be a good way to actually say that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I did put a link for a survey in the chat box. I would really, really appreciate it if you guys would do that. It takes about 60 seconds. You can do it on your phone, on your computer, but it just lets my bosses know that I'm doing my job. I have to provide those results. It's anonymous, but it's really just for me so I can prove I'm still doing my job and keep it. And so it'd be great if you guys would take a minute just to do that for me. And again, my contact information is on the PowerPoint. It's also in the chat box. So if you think of questions later, or you need some help with a resume or a cover letter, please feel free to reach out.
And just so everyone's aware, in the email that you'll receive with the recording of this presentation, we mentioned Sarah's previous presentation as well. We'll include that recording. That email will also include the link to her survey. And so if you don't have time today, if you have a second when that email comes through, I know she would greatly appreciate it. Well, we are a few minutes after the hour. Before we wrap things up, are there any final questions from anyone?
Miss Jolly,
Yes.
You mentioned, of course, appropriate address. Would there be a negative or positive as to wearing heels or flats?
So no, I think either is fine, with the exception of, making sure that heels are professional looking, or that shoes in general are not, scuffed or anything like that. But, heels, you can get into that territory where you've got like a 6-inch heel and a big platform on the front, and those get away from the office type heel. So I would say, keeping the heel 3 inches or less. You can definitely wear heels to the interview, and flats are completely acceptable as well. Again, just keeping it in the realms of what would look professional as opposed to going out heels. Also, closed-toed shoes as opposed to open-toed. Just in the name of professionalism, you're kind of thinking more conservative in dress, so toes covered, that kind of thing. So
Perfect, thank you.
mhm.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, and as Sarah said, her contact information is in the chat feature. I know if you think of additional questions, I'm sure she would be happy to correspond with you and give you other useful nuggets like the orange for interview. That was something I was definitely learned today, Sarah, and it wouldn't have been my guess. So thank you for everyone who attended. We hope that it was helpful to you. Sarah, thank you so much for your insight, and everyone be on the lookout for the email that you'll get with the recording and the slide deck presentation. Of course, those slides will also include Sarah's contact info for further questions. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.